I regret my actions. I really do apologize to the families for what I've done.
Monster of Tholeni gets 25 life terms. Mthatha. For 5 years, Bulelani Mabhayi terrorized the rural villagers of Tholeni in the Eastern Cape, preying on vulnerable women and children, who he raped and, in some cases, hacked to death. On Tuesday, Mthatha High Court Judge Noluthando Kanjwa sentenced him to 25 life sentences for 25 crimes committed between 2007 and 2012. Each sentence is to run concurrently and amount to 625 years. Mr. Mabhayi, you are not a person that society needs. Between 2007 and 2012, the community of Tholeni lived in fear because a predator was living among them. It's not clear how you were able to escape capture for such a long time. As the judge handed down her sentence, Mabhayi remained silent and avoided eye contact with the families and relatives of his victims sitting in the public gallery. His modus operandi involved stalking his targets, who were mostly vulnerable. It mattered not how young the victim was. No one was spared. Judge Kanjwa said. She reiterated the evidence that Mabhayi went for homes where there were no menfolk. Murmurs occasionally erupted in court as the judge reviewed the post-mortem results, revealing the severity of the wounds Mabhayi inflicted on his victims. The common trend that runs through these wounds shows the use of violent force. He, Mabhayi, would kill more than one victim in one house. I can't begin to imagine what was going through the minds of his victims while he was killing others. Kanjwa occasionally glared at Mabhayi during her hour-long sentence delivery. While Mabhayi has apologized, he hasn't disclosed the details of his crimes. To this day, I remain in the dark as to what drove him to commit the crimes, she said, reiterating how he had also preyed on unsuspecting people he worked for. He was well known and liked by people of that community. He took an unfair advantage of his knowledge of the homes he worked for. The deceased were attacked in the sanctuary of their homes where they expected to be safe. If what the social worker said is true, he doesn't seem to realize the enormity of his actions. He agreed that had he not been caught, he would have continued his crimes. In a prelude to her sentencing, Judge Kanjwa said the retribution would hopefully restore the faith of the community in the justice system. The sentence sparked a frenzy of celebrations led by Eastern Cape Social Development MEC Pemi Majudina. 20. By 20, Fambili ninge 20 life sentences Fambili, she shouted to loud cheers. Today justice has been served, and we hope the people of Tholeni will live in peace. We have similar cases in Mthatha, King Williamstown, and Mthatha. We hope this will serve as a deterrent to other would-be perpetrators. Among those celebrating the sentence was Naksolo Meshunyelwa, one of the many residents of Tholeni near Butterworth, whose loved ones were murdered. Mabhayi killed her mother and 13-year-old sister after raping them before turning on her 15-month-old son and hacking him to death. Her 12-year-old brother survived the attack but has been left brain-damaged. Naksolo, who has had to abandon her studies, said she was satisfied with the sentencing. It won't help the pain go away, but at least I know that the killer is in jail, the Tier cop who caught the monster of Tholeni Mthatha. He has cracked some of the most serious criminal cases in the Eastern Cape, including the arrest of a serial rapist in Mazamba, who raped and murdered women and removed their wombs for muti. But Captain Aaron Hanisi found the arrest of Bulelani Mabhayi, the monster of Tholeni, the most daunting. This was a tough case. People had no clue who was terrorizing the community, he said. Mabhayi operated in the Eastern Cape, preying on victims in Tholeni, a place that became known as the Village of Death. The village lies along the N2 freeway about 15 kilometers from Butterworth, between East London and Mthatha. It's a small village. Herds of cattle, sheep, and goats graze on the vegetation in the almost barren landscape. There aren't many jobs around, and most people just keep livestock or do odd jobs in the village or town, said Nomfundiso Mpanchain, an activist whose house was used as a victim support center for traumatized relatives and other frightened villagers during Mabhayi's reign of terror. There are abandoned and dilapidated buildings interspersed with brightly painted houses. The deserted houses belong to Mabhayi's victims or their relatives, an eerie reminder of his trail of destruction. It was in June 2010, after the murder of Sinazo Mbeki and her 2 grandchildren, that Hanis was tasked with tracking the perpetrator. Behind a string of murders now believed to be linked, the 3 killings brought to 8, the tally of murders that were believed to have been committed by the same perpetrator. Authorities were, for the first time, admitting that they were looking for a serial killer. Hanis and his detectives initially put up a R$250,000 reward for an arrest leading to a conviction, but nobody provided any helpful information. We called the psychologist's office to help determine if we had a serial killer on our hands. They confirmed that, said Hanis. DNA samples were also collected from some of the village residents with previous rape convictions in the hope of finding a link. It came to naught. The case stalled, and so Provincial Police Management initiated Operation Good Hope, drawing on police from various units, including the Organized Crime Unit, the Dog Unit, and the Forensic Divisions. The joint operation made its first move on May 17, 2010, when hundreds of males over the age of 16 were rounded up in an early morning blitz. They were taken to a local church, where their DNA samples and fingerprints were taken. Mabhayi was among them. However, his fingerprints could not be lifted because he had an ID document. The police focus did not deter him back. He continued with his killing spree, murdering 5 more people over the next 13 months. When it was finally made, the breakthrough resulted from Mabhayi's indiscretion rather than good detective work. On August 11th last year, Mabhayi murdered Nofum Zile, Florence Lubambo, and accidentally left his shoe at the crime scene. It was a mistake that led to his arrest. We were looking for another person who happened to be his Mabhayi brother, the late Siyabonga. Incidentally, we got him because of the shoe we found at the crime scene. It matched the one he was wearing, said Hanis. The saliva drawn from Mabhayi during Operation Good Hope proved indispensable. His DNA test results linked him to the string of murders. It was a huge relief when he was arrested. I can gladly go on pension now, laughed Hanisa. As Mabhayi began serving his life sentence in prison on Tuesday, residents of the village he terrorized for so long said they continued to live in fear. Many believe Mabhayi was not working alone when he committed his crimes. When he testified in court, he, Mabhayi, always said "we" when he answered questions. Who else was he referring to? Asked Mponchain. Serial killer. Suffered from iqungu. 2 traditional healers in the province say serial killer Bulelani Mabhayi suffered from a spiritual sickness called iqungu in his reign of terror, during which he killed 20 women and children in Tholeni village. Without condoning the horrific crimes that occurred between 2007 and 2012, the traditionalists said Mabhayi continued on his killing spree because he was not cleansed after the first murder. Iqungu happens to a person who has killed another person and has not spiritually undergone the traditional cleansing ceremony afterward. When a person kills another person in January, for example, he also kills in the same month the following year if he has not undergone a cleansing ceremony, and that is because of Ching, Eastern Cape's prominent traditional affairs researcher, Mpumelelo Makuliwe. Mabhayi, 39, alias Tlayedwa, was found guilty of killing 20 women and children at Tholeni, Butterworth. He was also found guilty of 6 rape charges and 10 housebreaking counts. In May 2007, Mabhayi killed No Finish Mayakiso, and in May last year, he killed Nomandla Misunyelwa, Lucanyo Maxunyelwa, and Liyema Mixunyelwa. In January 2008, he murdered Anasediswa Mafika, Zintla Mafika, and Lazola Mafika, child, and in January 2009, he killed Nokwezi Nogaya and her young daughter, Sifuksolo Nogaya. When he killed in May 2007, Lungu had been following him, and that is why he also killed in May 2012. The same happened when he killed in January 2008. Iqungu followed him to kill also in January 2009, Makuliwe said. According to Makuliwe, even if a person had killed another person mercilessly or in defense, iqungu will happen. The sickness, which had been known for years in Xhosa custom, reverses only when the family has conducted a cleansing ceremony on the killer so that he does not repeat the deed. Mabhayi told the court during his trial last week that he committed the murders because there was an evil spirit following him. I did this because of the evil spirit. and I regret doing that, he told the Butterworth Magistrates Court. Serial killer's guilty plea shows remorse. Johannesburg. For more than 5 years, the serial killer terrorized residents at an Eastern Cape village, breaking into their homes at night and raping and killing women and children. Bulelani Mabhayi, 38, used a bush knife and an axe to kill. His murder spree ended in August last year when police pounced on him while he took a nap at a house in Tholeni, near Butterworth, Eastern Cape. By then, his victim tally had reached 36, 20 murders, 6 rapes and 10 housebreakings. On Wednesday, Mabhayi's lawyer pleaded for mercy from the Mthatha High Court sitting in Butterworth. This was after Mabhayi had pleaded guilty to all charges on Tuesday. He has pleaded guilty, and this shows remorse, said Mabhayi's legal counsel, Advocate Simfiwe Soga, sparking murmurs from the public gallery packed with relatives of Mabhayi's victims. Soga, arguing in mitigation of the sentence, said Mabhayi's father had died when he was 12 and his mother a year later. He had no parents and no place to call home. A severe sentence does not always serve the public interest. The court should show a degree of mercy. State prosecutor Advocate Ndoyisile Lamla, arguing in aggravation of sentence, said there were substantial and compelling circumstances for a heavy sentence. All the deceased were attacked at their homes at night and were defenseless persons. The offenses were premeditated and executed with precision, he said. Referring to the callousness of Mabhayi's crimes, Lamla said some of Mabhayi's victims were people for whom he used to do odd jobs as a builder. He targeted homes where there were no men. His youngest victim was 6 years old and the oldest 79. After raping them, he would hit them on the head with an axe. The court should send out a clear message to deter would-be rapists and murderers. Lamla said, he, Mabhayi, has no respect for human life. He is a person who doesn't deserve to be living in that community. There is a public outcry about crimes of rape and murder, and the only deterrent is to impose a severe and heavy sentence. Lamla called for a fixed, non-parable jail term of at least 45 years. Testifying in aggravation of sentencing earlier, Nomfundiso Mpanchane told the court how terrified residents, especially women and children, were forced to take refuge at the local victim support center as Mabhayi's reign of terror continued. They couldn't sleep out of terror, Mpanchane said. She testified that the women would return home with their children in the morning to bathe them before they went to school. When asked if she would forgive Mabhayi, Mpanchane said, "We will never forgive him. What he did was terrible. We won't accept his apology." Mpanchane said, "I speak for all residents, and if anyone is called to testify, they will confirm that. We are still angry with him." Throughout the proceedings, Mabhayi showed no emotion. Sentencing was reserved. "We will never forgive you," the serial killer said. "We will never forgive him." These were the words of the final witness in the Tholeni serial killer trial. Tholeni community activist Nomfundiso Mpanchane said she spoke for the entire village when she condemned serial killer Bulelani Mabhayi for his rape and murder spree that saw 19 women and children killed in their home village. Mabhayi murdered a 20th woman from another village. State prosecutor Advocate Ndoyisile Lamla called Mpanchane as part of his argument for aggravating circumstances ahead of Mabhayi's sentencing. Mabhayi lived in the Mpanchane household throughout his reign of terror in Tholeni village. From 2008 to 2012, he lived just meters from a victim crisis center set up in 2009 to protect women and children in the area from his violence. Mpanchane said the community was terrified of having men as protectors, so the women decided to protect each other. "We could not agree to have men look after us because we knew some of them were the perpetrators," she said. Mpanchane said social workers came to Tholeni to assist them, and that was when the crisis center was set up. "People realized male persons were abusing us and the victim center would be there to help us," she added. "We decided that as womenfolk, we should try to run away from the likes of people like Mabhayi." She said it was after the Mkshunyelwa family was brutally murdered that the center became a place of refuge. Women from around Tholeni slept there with their children and grandchildren. Mabhayi murdered Nomandla, Liema, 1 and Lucanio Mkshunyelwa, 13, in May 2012.
the man who butchered her mother,
While talking about the murder of this family, Mthatha broke down in tears.
In their sleep. He then raped their lifeless bodies.
Presiding, Judge
When
Nolathando
Nilwa was
Kanjwa
sleeping at
offered
a
to
friend's
adjourn
house
court
that
for a few
fateful
minutes so
night,
she could
her
compose
uncle,
herself,
Fundisile,
but she said
made
she
the
could carry
gruesome
on
discovery
testifying.
the next morning.
Mthatha said the center was established in her yard, and
Now,
unbeknown
as
to
they
the
make their
women,
way to
the source of
court,
their
they
fears
stop
lived
at
only
the
meters
graves
away.
of their loved
She told the
ones.
women, some over 70,
But
that they were
Nilwa
so
still
afraid they
lives
left
in
everything
fear.
in their
She
homes to
wakes up
sleep together
every
in the
night
center.
at midnight.
While
Mabhayi's
testifying,
preferred time
Mthatha
to
stared
attack.
straight ahead at the dock
And
where
even though
Mabhayi
he
was
was
sitting.
arrested a year
She
ago,
said some of the
she's
women
still scared
were so
he's going to
traumatized
come
that no
back
men were
and
allowed
kill
anywhere
her.
near the crisis center.
In court,
Lamla
he
told
tried to instruct
Mthatha about
her to
Mabhayi's
guilty.
apology for Tuesday. He
Mabhayi
told this
stood in
court
the
he's
dock.
very sorry for what he did and realizes what he did was wrong. He apologized to the people of Tholeni in South Africa. What do you have to say to that? Mthatha grew angry. Raising her voice and staring straight ahead, she said, "We will never forgive you." In his address to the judge, Advocate Simfai Wisoga submitted to the court in mitigation that 3 matters should be taken into consideration: the fact that Mabhayi pleaded guilty, that there are prospects of him being rehabilitated, as well as that Mabhayi is a known daga smoker, having smoked daga since his teens. Soga also submitted that the sentences of those crimes that were committed on the same day, such as when Mabhayi murdered all the occupants of a single household, should run concurrently. In his submission on aggravating circumstances, Lamla agreed that where
5
Mabhayi
years
committed
for this
offenses
day, to
at
look
the same time and
39-year-old
place,
Bulelani
his
Mabhayi
sentences
in the eye.
should
The man
run concurrently.
who butchered her mother,
Lamla
15-year-old
recommended
sister,
Mabhayi be
and her
sentenced to
1-year-old
life
daughter
behind
in their
bars for
sleep.
each count of rape
He
and
then
murder,
raped their lifeless
26
bodies.
charges in total.
When
He
Nilwa
further
was
recommended
sleeping
that
at a friend's
Mabhayi be
house
given a
that
minimum
fateful night,
no parole
her
of
uncle
45
Fundisile
years.
made the gruesome
I chose weak
discovery the
ones.
next morning.
The killer admits the Eastern Cape man who pleaded guilty this week to
Now,
murdering
as they
20
make their
people
way
said
to
he was
court,
sorry.
They stop at the
On
graves
Tuesday,
of their loved ones.
Bulelani Mabhayi, 39,
But when
pleaded
Nilwa
guilty
still
to all
lives in
36
fear,
charges
she wakes
leveled
up
against
every
him,
night
which
at
include
midnight.
rape and
Mabhayi's
murder.
preferred time to
If
attack.
convicted,
And
Mabhayi
even though he
will
was
be the worst
arrested
serial
a year
killer
ago,
South Africa has
she's
seen
still
in over
scared
15
he's going
years.
to come back and
Mabhayi's
kill her.
home village, Tholeni,
In court,
based in the
the
Butterworth
quiet
district,
construction worker
became known
pleaded
as South
guilty.
Africa's village of death under his
Mabhayi
reign of
stood in the
terror.
dock.
Even to the people of Tholeni and the citizens of South Africa, I would like to say I apologize, and I am very sorry for what I did, he said. Less than an hour after his apology, however, Mabhayi told the court that had he not been arrested, in August 2012 he would still be raping and killing. State prosecutor advocate Ndoyisile Lamla grilled Mabhayi on how he chose his victims, asking whether he intentionally chose women-headed households with children. The ever-meek Mabhayi mumbled throughout his testimony and answered Ndiyavuma, correct, to most of Lamla's questions. His first victim, Nofanish Eslina Mayakiso, attacked Mabhayi with an axe when he first broke into her house. He later returned with his axe, raped her, and hacked her to death in May 2007. She was his oldest victim at 79. Why did you rape an elderly woman? Mabhayi said that as an older woman, Mayakiso would be weaker. He killed his victims because they knew him and would be able to identify him, he added. Lamla asked whether Mabhayi believed his youngest victims, little more than a year old, could identify him to other villagers. They could not do that because they could not know you, Lamla said. Lamla put it to Mabhayi that he murdered Ongama Mbeki, who was 1 year and 2 months old. Exclamations of anger were heard from several women in the packed courtroom. Mabhayi told the court he killed the child because he was driven by an evil spirit. Lamla asked, "Do you agree with me that there is no reason why you should kill these children?" Mabhayi said Lamla was right. Lamla asked Mabhayi whether he still had value to society or should be locked away for the rest of his life. He replied that he believed he still had value, because I have learned from this experience and that what I was doing was not right and unacceptable. Lamla was incredulous, telling the court that Mabhayi continued his murdering spree up until his arrest in August 2012. Do you agree that if the police had not arrested you, you would still be raping and killing people of the Tholeni locality? Mabhayi answered yes. Lamla told Mabhayi that he could not possibly be sorry for his actions. Do you agree that you are the kind of person who has no respect for human life? Indiavuma, he replied. Mabhayi has been charged with the murder of 20 women and children and not 23 as initially reported. How I murdered 20 villagers, guilty. This word was repeated 36 times by the Eastern Cape's worst serial killer, as he admitted to murdering 20 women and children. Sobs occasionally broke the courtroom silence as people heard him admit to killing their relatives and friends. Bulelani Mabhayi, accused of 36 criminal charges, 20 of which are murder, pleaded guilty to all charges against him. The other 16 charges include rape. At least 9 murder victims were children. One count of rape was withdrawn by the prosecution yesterday morning, as the Mthatha High Court sat in a special hearing in the Butterworth Magistrates Court this week. The court was tense yesterday, but calmer than when Mabhayi first appeared on Monday, when at least 30 police officers surrounded the court. Each charge against Mabhayi was read out to him, and he was asked whether he was guilty or not guilty. Mabhayi, a slight man dressed in a khaki jacket with a blue hood, meekly answered, "Ndinetyala, I am guilty," to each charge. Mabhayi looked straight at the court interpreter as he spoke. While listening to the charge, Mabhayi frowned slightly, chewed his lips, and stared into the middle distance. Mabhayi's defense read a statement from the killer, wherein he detailed how he committed his crimes. In most cases, the statement read, he broke into people's homes, armed with an axe or panga. All his victims were women and children, and he primarily targeted homes where women were the head of the household. After breaking in, Mabhayi would attempt to rape the women and girls in the house before killing everyone by chopping them to death with the axe or panga. Noxolo Mshunyelwa, dressed in her school uniform, burst into tears and had to be removed from the courtroom when Mabhayi answered Indinetyala to whether he had murdered her mother, Nomandla. Mabhayi pleaded guilty to murdering both Noxolo's 1-year-old son and her mother, and to raping and murdering her cousin Iqungu, 13. Later, another woman burst into tears and was led out of the court. Several others cried quietly as the trial progressed. Mabhayi neither looked up nor acknowledged the women when they were led out weeping. 19 of the murders took place in Mabhayi's home village, which became known as the Village of Death as a result of his attacks. In his statement, Mabhayi further said he knew all his victims and they knew him. He said this was why he had murdered them. Butterworth police spokesman Captain Jackson Manatha said Mabhayi's guilty pleas resulted from excellent police work. I am still struggling to find the suitable word to describe how relieved we are as the South African police services that the accused pleaded guilty to all the charges leveled against him, he said. Mabhayi said he murdered a 20th woman after he met her while traveling. Mabhayi said he told the woman he loved her and had consensual sex with her but decided to murder her anyway. He directed police to the site where her remains were buried, said prosecutor advocate Ndoyisile Lamla. The defense requested an adjournment to examine the reports on psychological and social circumstances. Arguments on the mitigation of sentencing will take place today. After the hearing, Noxolo told the dispatch that her heart was broken after losing her mother. She was everything to me and I was everything to her, she said. It is still tough living without my mother and son, but I'll be okay. Mabhayi sentencing arguments to be heard. The court is expected to hear evidence in mitigation of the sentence of one of the country's worst serial killers, Bulelani Mabhayi, who on Tuesday pleaded guilty to 20 charges of murder in the Butterworth Magistrates Court, dubbed the Monster of Tholeni. Mabhayi also pleaded guilty to 6 counts of rape and 10 of housebreaking. Mabhayi, 38, terrorized the community of Tholeni near Butterworth between 2007 and 2012. Most of his victims were women. The court heard that he allegedly used an axe and bush knife to torment and kill his victims. He also broke into their houses where he would rape and murder the women. Prosecutor Ndoyisile Lamla took about 15 minutes to read Mabhayi's charges before a packed court, which included families of the alleged serial killer's victims. He stood, emotionless, and looked downwards as the charges were read out to him. Before a Xhosa interpreter took the stand to translate the charges, Judge Noluthando Kanjwa indicated to Mabhayi that he faced a minimum of life in jail on each count, in the event of your conviction. I plead guilty to all charges, Mabhayi said, showing no emotion. Some community members wept as Lamla read Mabhayi's charges in his home language. Noxolo Monyelwa, whose 3 family members, including her mother, sister, and 1-year-old son, were allegedly hacked to death by Mabhayi, collapsed when Lamla read out a charge detailing how her family was killed. Social workers rushed to her aid for comfort and further counseling. She was whisked out of court. Msunyelwa, who cried uncontrollably, recently said she wanted to know why Mabhayi had allegedly killed his family members. After a 5-year murder and rape spree, Mabhayi was finally arrested in August last year and has been in custody ever since. His reign of terror resulted in the area now being named the Village of Death. Mabhayi was nicknamed Dlayedwa, he who eats alone. Villagers said they gave him the nickname because he always wanted to be alone. National Prosecuting Authority Regional Spokesperson Luxolo Tiali said they were glad Mabhayi had pleaded guilty to all the charges. This is an indication that we had a strong case against him. This will also save us time and state resources, Tiali said. Eastern Cape MEC for Social Development, Pemi Majodina, said Mabhayi must rot in jail. Death Village serial killer trial begins. Negotiations behind the scenes dominated day 1 of the trial of Eastern Cape serial killer suspect Bulelani Mabhayi yesterday. Mabhayi, 39, faces 37 charges, of which 23 are counts of murder. He appeared in the Mthatha High Court, which sat in Butterworth yesterday. Mabhayi is accused of having terrorized Tholeni village in Butterworth, which became known as the Death Village, in the wake of attacks between 2007 and 2012. Mabhayi spent most of the day in confidential talks with his attorney. Rumors circulated in court yesterday that a plea bargain was being discussed, but National Prosecuting Authority spokesman Luxolo Tiali did not confirm this. Mabhayi is consulting with his legal aid attorney, and what happens in those consultations is confidential, Tiali said. There were at least 30 police officers at the court, many in full riot gear. Butterworth police spokesman Captain Jackson Mthatha said the extra police were brought in to maintain order. We had public order policing members from Queenstown and Crime Prevention Unit of Butterworth police members. They are here to maintain law and order as high-ranking government. Officials are attending the case, Mthatha said. They are also here to control the members of the community who come in big numbers since this is a high-profile case. Social Development MEC Pemi Majodina was among those present. She appealed to the public to remain calm. The case was delayed by several hours, causing frustration among those waiting. During the delay, Majodina appealed to them to let justice take its course. She also asked the public to remain calm when Mabhayi eventually appeared in court. When Mabhayi walked past a group of gathered community members, some lunged toward police officers clustered around the suspect as he walked to the consultation room to meet his attorney. Some were crying while others expressed their anger at Mabhayi. Mabhayi remained in the consultation room for more than an hour before he was led back to court, this time with police officers lining a walkway for him. Mabhayi appeared before presiding Judge Noluthando Kanjwa, who approved a request that the case be postponed to today so that Mabhayi could consult further with his attorney. Kanjwa further ordered that Mabhayi consult with his attorney in court, as opposed to in prison, as is standard, to speed up the matter. If found guilty of the 23 murder charges brought against him, Mabhayi will be among South Africa's top 3 serial killers in the country's history, and the worst in more than a decade. Majodina also circulated a petition in court against Mabhayi's release. The petition demanded that Mabhayi remain in police custody and settle the trial quickly. He, Mabhayi, must be thrown in dark cells and rot in jail. The jail keys must be thrown far away. The petition read. Majodina said she ensured that the case was heard as a special sitting of the Mthatha High Court in the Butterworth Magistrates Court. Services must be brought to the people, and these people affected by Mabhayi are primarily unemployed and poor. They can't afford to travel to Mthatha to witness the case, Majodina said. Villagers to relive serial killer terror, and Eastern Cape. Community devastated by a spate of killings will have to relive the trauma from today, as a man suspected of being one of the worst serial killers in South African history goes on trial. Bulelani Mabhayi, 39, will appear in the Butterworth Magistrates' Court for allegedly terrorizing the people of Tholeni, a village that became known as the Village of Death. Mabhayi faces 37 criminal charges, 23 of them murder. Police spokesman Captain Jackson Mthatha said Mabhayi is charged with several unsolved rape and murder cases that had the people of Tholeni living in fear from 2008. Despite Mabhayi's arrest and imminent trial, the people of Tholeni village continue to live in fear. Theron Mxhunyelwa told the Daily Dispatch 3 members of his family had been hacked to death, allegedly by Mabhayi. A fourth, a teenage boy, barely survived and is now brain damaged. Mxhunyelwa's niece Xhosa said both her mother and 1-year-old son were hacked to death.
Man who butchered her mother,
I was away and my mother was looking after my
sister,
son,
and her 1-year-old
she said before she
daughter in
abruptly
their
stopped
sleep.
speaking.
He then raped their lifeless
Xhosa
bodies.
said Xhosa was afraid and traumatized by the murders. Pointing at the dispatch reporter's feet, Mxhunyelwa said, "This is where we found them in a pool of blood." On Friday, he stood only meters from a Department of Justice Imbizo 10 erected at the Butterworth Magistrates' Court to launch South Africa's first new sexual offences curry. If found guilty of the 23 murder charges brought against him, Mabhayi will be among South Africa's top 3 serial killers in the country's known history, and the worst in more than a decade. The South African strangler Moses Sithole raped and murdered at least 38 women before he was arrested in 1995. Sithole was convicted of the murders and another 40 rapes and sentenced to 24 and 10 years imprisonment in 1997. Mabhayi is related to convicted murderer Mthatha Mabhayi, who was last year sentenced to 2 life terms and an additional 10 years for the murder of a 70-year-old Tholeni woman and her 12-year-old granddaughter. Mxhunyelwa said he feared for Tholeni's future. Many families here still live with this pain, and what if he, Mabhayi, wasn't the only killer? Justice Minister Jeff Radebe on Friday expressed the government's condolences and solidarity with the Butterworth community for the brutal killing of the villagers. In an exclusive interview with The Dispatch, Radebe said the allegations against Mabhayi, if true, were heinous. Justice must take its course, and if proven guilty, Mabhayi must face the harshest sanction possible under South African law. The minister spoke to The Dispatch shortly after launching South Africa's first new sexual offences court in Butterworth. Radebe, his deputy minister Andries Nel, and Eastern Cape MEC for Social Development Phemi Mayodina, among others, spoke at the Imbizo in Tholeni village. "We express our deepest heartfelt condolences to the Tholeni community," Radebe said, adding that Tholeni was intentionally chosen as the site for the Imbizo. Mabhayi was nabbed by police in August last year, shortly after he allegedly murdered an elderly Tholeni woman the week before. His arrest came a few hours after police discovered the body of Nofumzila Lubambo, who had been hacked to death in her sleep. Her death brought to 19 the number of people killed in the village since 2008. Mabhayi will appear in court today in a special sitting of the Mthatha High Court in Butterworth, arranged to allow the families of the Tholeni victims to observe the trial proceedings. Suspected killer to be assessed. The Mthatha High Court has referred suspected Tholeni serial killer Bulelani Mabhayi to the Fort England Psychiatric Hospital in Grahamstown for mental assessment. The 39-year-old resident of Tholeni village near Butterworth is facing 23 counts of murder, 8 counts of housebreaking, and 5 of rape. The counts of murder all relate to the killing of women and children in Tholeni, one of the worst cases of serial murders in the province. Mabhayi has been in custody since his arrest on August 12, 2012. Mabhayi was escorted to court yesterday by armed police officers. He wore white takis and a gray lumberjacket. The case was referred to the Mthatha High Court after the Butterworth District Court had heard it. The state yesterday successfully applied for an order to move Mabhayi to Fort England for psychiatric assessment for 30 days. Mabhayi will be moved today, and the matter has been postponed until March for the psychiatric report. Mabhayi's legal aid essay attorney, Nick Dutoit, said he has discussed with his client that he had to undergo a psychiatric assessment. "He does not have a problem with that, my lord," he said. The director of public prosecutions earlier requested that Mabhayi be sent to a psychiatric hospital after the results of medical tests conducted on his mental fitness by a district surgeon were inconclusive. Social Development MEC Pemi Majidina said she hoped the trial would be heard in Butterworth and not in Mthatha to allow the families to attend proceedings. I have met with Justice Department Minister Jeff Radibi and informed him of the seriousness of the case, and he agreed it is a priority case and has to be heard in Butterworth. She said most of the alleged crimes were committed in or near Butterworth, and most people interested in the case could not afford daily transport to Mthatha. South African Village of Death serial killer suspect arrested. A man suspected in a string of grisly rapes and murders that gave a South African community the moniker Village of Death has been arrested, a local newspaper said Wednesday. Johannesburg. A man suspected in a string of grisly rapes and murders that gave a South African community the moniker Village of Death has been arrested, a local newspaper said Wednesday. Bulelani Mabhayi, 39, was arrested on Sunday after an older woman was found hacked to death the night before in the Eastern Cape village of Tholeni, the Daily Dispatch reported. He is being charged with a string of unresolved rapes and murders in the village, where 19 women have been slain since 2009. Police spokesman Jackson Mthatha told the paper. Police took Mabhayi to the village, where he pointed out the homes of the suspected victims, Mthatha said. The whole village told the police as the man pointed out one house after the other. He told the neighbors. Mabhayi is related to convicted murderer Tholeni Mabhayi, who this year was sentenced to 2 life terms over the murders of a 70-year-old and her 12-year-old granddaughter in Tholeni. Residents said they were relieved but still scared. We don't know if he was the only one committing these crimes. We will remain cautious until we know he was the only suspect, resident Noenile Mayakiso told the paper. South Africa has one of the world's highest rates of rape and murder outside of a war zone. Although the number of murders has steadily declined since the end of white minority rule in 1994, an average of 43 people are killed every day.